therefore no physical meeting location will be available. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL on the agenda. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial the number on the agenda and the meeting code there. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, available. To access this meeting remotely, join from PC, Mac, iPad.
Okay. Go
Press
ahead.
star 9. Sure. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 and wait to be recognized. Okay. Shall we do a roll call?
Yes, we shall. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Chang.
Here.
Board Member Harris has an excused absence. Board Member Lethwich.
Here.
Board Member Levine.
Here.
Board Member Mizell.
Here.
Board Member Owens.
Here.
Board Member Ramsey.
Here.
Okay, Chair, we have quorum.
Great. Let's discuss the agenda. Are there any?
Let's introduce the other people here.
Absolutely. Thank you. We also have Chief Lewis is here. Thank you, Chief, for joining us. We have Lieutenant Turner.
And Deputy City Attorney Iris Mattis.
Deputy City Attorney Iris Mattis is here with us. Is there anyone else I have not noted on the panelist list?
Actually, Chair, yes. I'm here and present.
I'm
and-
sorry, did I skip you?
I was skipped.
Oh,
That's all right.
okay. Thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you for letting us know, Board Member Moore. Great. Okay. Any questions or comments on the agenda? We did have some last minute kind of changes.
I think, Chair, once we get to 9A or business, we'll talk more about what exactly we're going to do. The agenda was written purposely broadly because we didn't know what council was going to do or not do last night.
Right.
So now that we know that, we can move forward with more specificity, but I think we could save the discussion until we get there.
Okay, that makes sense. We will get to it when we get to it. And any other comments or questions on the agenda otherwise? There does not appear to be. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Great. Any objections? Neither hearing nor seeing any motion to approve. So moved for approval agenda. Public comment. Let's see here. I'm going to pull up the timer. And I'm going to share my screen. So I think we have Wendy Alfson first. Ms. Alfson, would you like to?
Yes. Thank you, Chair and members. I wanted to, as a member of the Berkeley Friends Meeting Racial Justice Action Team, to express my appreciation for all the work you've been doing on the military equipment policy. The council, I felt, did respect the communication of the board and follow at least the spirit of your recommendations by not just approving the policy, particularly not bunching the city ordinance and the 709 state policy together and approving it all in one. Made some changes of things you had called to their attention in the impact statements and sent everything clearly, referred it back to you. I think July 26th, the deadline imposed by the city attorney. I didn't agree was accurately calculated, not that anybody asked or cared what I thought about it, but I think it does create pressure on the board because it's only 6 weeks, but we really urge you to take this opportunity to make the policy one that provides for community safety and stand ready to be of what assistance we can in that regard. I hope that additional members will support and join the committee. And just wish you every success. Thank you for your work and service.
Great, thank you. John Lindsay Poland.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, board members with the American Friends Service Committee. Yes, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing. I know you're going to be hearing, I'm speaking to item 9, and I know you'll be hearing a summary of what the City Council did. I also, if in case it comes up, would respectfully differ from the interpretation that was given that this has to go back to the council by July 26th. This is the policy 709 does not reference the ordinance or the impact statement. It is clearly submitted to comply with AB 41, which has a 180-day timeline for the city council, the governing body, to act. And I believe that the city attorney interpreted this as a compliance piece for the local ordinance. However, I do think the state law is very clear, and this is a document that was clearly submitted with the intent to comply with the state law. I also do think that when you come to the point of deciding how to work on this, I hope you will consider assigning this to a subcommittee that can work on it. As I understand it, the Lexipol subcommittee is not yet reconstituted and can't be reconstituted tonight because it's not on the agenda, which makes the military equipment subcommittee the likely candidate. If board member Mizell is actually going to pass his board exams to become an attorney, then he probably does need to do a lot of work on that rather than committing a bunch of time over the next month to this. And in that case, I hope that other board members will step up. I do think that the experience on the Lexipol committee that board member Mizell has, there are other thoughtful members of the board whose work on this in a short period of time would be very helpful. Policy 709 is a Lexipol policy, and it refers to some other Lexipol policies for specific types of equipment. And therefore, I think that the board can do some work on it. It can say we want this to come back for other specific Lexipol policies. The board member does have that within its mandate. So you can do as much work on it as there's capacity to do, and then continue that work as a Lexipol project of the board. Again, we are very willing and in whatever way we can to support the work of the board on this issue going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Rivka Palatnik. Ms. Palatnik, are you ready to speak? I think you're on mute.
I am. I had trouble unmuting. Okay, so I have to say, being dramatic, quote, something is rotten in the city of Berkeley. That quote's adapted from Shakespeare's Hamlet, and I'm applying it to the process of choosing the new DPA. To put it quite bluntly, I would say that the city manager has taken over the selection process to an extent that violates a key intention of Measure II and the terms laid out for the process in the city's contract with the buyers group. An important goal in replacing the PRC was to make the new DPA and PAB independent of the city manager. When Measure II was developed, the network of community groups I'm a part of objected to a provision put in that the city manager would submit 3 candidates to the mayor and council. But it was the buyers group contract that spelled out the process more specifically. And we were led to believe that the mayor and council, the PAB, and the community would have a significant part in the earlier stages of the process. The contract, the buyers group was supposed to choose from the 16 applicants a short list of 10 qualified candidates, and then turn them over to the mayor and council, not to herself, and the mayor and council would select the top candidates for formal interviews. But the mayor and council seem to have played no role in this crucial round of narrowing down, presumably. I'm being interrupted. Presumably, the city manager did that selection. Then, according to the contract, the interviews were to be done by the mayor and council and the PAB subcommittee. Instead, the city manager said there would be 3 panels of interviewers, a community panel chosen by her, a PAB panel, which would include the 3 board members on the search committee, but eliminated the 2 public members and added some outside experts. And finally, a staff panel, presumably chosen by her. At the last minute, I think as a result of some complaints, she changed it to 2 panels, community and the PAB plus outside experts. So the interviews happened today, and now she gets to choose the 3 finalists to submit to the mayor and council. People have been saying we should choose our battles, but I think this is really serious and needs some battling. So I intend to address the mayor about this, the council, and I would like other people to raise objections to this illegitimate process that gives the city manager too much influence over this independent DPA and shuts people out of the process who are supposed to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who would like to speak?
I see
Atwell?
Barb Atwell. I'm allowing her to talk right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name's Barb Atwell. I'm a Quaker with the Berkeley Friends Meeting of Racial Justice Action Team. I am interested in echoing what Wendy Alfson and John Lindsay Poland spoke about. I'm not a politician, but I have been working closely with the American Friends Service Committee for about 8 months on the AB 481, and I'm really interested in Berkeley doing it right because I'm a proud Berkeley resident. So I am just saying that as we move along, I can talk about the tear gas and the projectiles and the policies and the deployment of assault rifles and all of the different details, but I want you to know that I support you in whatever you can do to make it right. I'm really thankful that the council sent it back to you. And I wanted you to know that since I have been deeply involved and want it to work, I'm willing to collaborate in that subcommittee if needed. That's all. Thank you.
And Kit Saganor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to, of course, join with others in thanking you for the work you're doing. You guys have been working very hard, and it really makes a big difference. Thank you so much. I would like to echo the concerns of Rivka Palatnik about the selection process. That is very much a concern. The independence of the PAB and its director are a very important part of what needs to happen. Thirdly, I want to mention I sent an email with a suggestion about having participation from members of the public on the subcommittees. You're not yet in a position to appoint members of the public as non-voting members of subcommittees, but in terms of a member of the public participating and working, you do have the option to enable that or not enable it, whether it would be helpful or a distraction. simply by at the meeting promoting that person to panelists. The chair of the subcommittee can merely ask if there's any objection to suspending that aspect of the rules. In fact, I did see you do this at one subcommittee meeting, and you might want to do it on a somewhat regular basis if it's going to be helpful for the work that you need to accomplish. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe I'll email you about this also. I just I know you have no time, but there was a very interesting article today in The Guardian about the clearances paradox, which is looking at the interaction or interrelation between arrests for minor offenses and the ability of a police department to solve murders and non-fatal shootings, the clearance rate of solving those kinds of crimes. And it references a number of different studies and talks about what's happening in New York City and things that have happened in New York City. I don't know if the Berkeley Police Department reports its clearance rate among all the many statistics it now reports, but I thought it was a very interesting article on looking on how really the trust of people in the police to protect them and so forth can really have a big effect on the ability of the police to solve murders and serious crime, which I know is something that's very important to all of us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public who would like to speak?
Chair, I just wanted to chime in for the public and mention that you can find the department's clearance rates on openjustice.doj.cal.gov, along with the statistics of basically every department in the state.
Thank you. That's super helpful. The California's DOJ keeps track of that. All right. Any other members of the public who would like to speak?
I don't see any more raised hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to go to item 4. Any questions or comments on our minutes from our last regular meeting of June 8th, 2022?
I move we accept the minutes.
Great. Will someone second? Seconded. Great. Board Member Moore. Any objections? Not seeing or hearing any, so moved. Item 5, Chair and Board Members reports. I'll talk quickly in terms of my report. So we were out Sunday on Juneteenth, a very important day. A number of us were there. There was Board Members Calavita, Levine, Ramsey was there. The Vice Chair, Mr. Mizell, was there as well. And Kit Sagnor, member of the public, was very helpful. Let us use her nice table and seats. We had a canopy out there, and we had a placard as well. We engaged with lots of members of the public, young and old. My observation was that lots of people were excited to learn about us, despite having been residents of Berkeley for decades. Lots of people were just learning about us. And it's something that's been raised before by Director Lee and other members, that we still have a lot of outreach to do to ensure awareness of the Police Accountability Board, of civilian-based oversight. So it's an important outreach, if you want to call it branding type of issue. And my understanding is that we have not insignificant funds for outreach that we will hopefully be able to tap to when there's appropriate staffing time, which is an issue that is competing with a lot of different priorities right now. So it's really important to do this type of outreach. It's a way to have that one-on-one interaction with members of the public, and there's nothing like that in terms of engagement with the community. And it was also great to see members of the board that I have not seen in person for a very long time. Some of them I've never met before in person. Board member Moore was there too, as well, and I met him in person too. I think that's it for me. Are there other board members who would like to speak? Also, those who were there at Juneteenth. No. And by the way, I met a number of BPD officers there too. We chatted with many of them and had some nice conversations with them on a range of issues, and got to meet some folks that we have only seen on Zoom too. So that was a nice experience as well.
No, we're always usually across from the BPD on these events. And yes, it's nice to see those folks in person too. And some city council members came by as well as their staff. So it was a great event.
Absolutely. Okay.
Did board member Levine get mentioned? I don't remember if I missed her name or if you didn't say her name.
I hopefully I didn't miss her name. She was certainly there, and I got to chat with her, met her in person. Board member Levine was there as well. So quite a few of us were there, and the Dum Dums are very popular, by the way. That's our lollipops. So heads would swivel as soon as they saw Dum Dums on the pack of Dum Dums on the table. Competing against the BPD's footballs and frisbees and lanyards and pens.
Yes. Use our outreach money and buy some swag.
Yeah, we're gonna build some swag up and probably try to do a logo competition of some sort. There's a conversation about that as well. So if there's no other commentary by board members, we'll move on to the director.
Member Moore's hand is raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment, and for the board for reflection moving forward, when we do outreach, the best place for us to be is probably not next to BPD, as we have complaint paperwork and as they can see our tent and we can see theirs. And people who did want to approach and discuss a little bit more in detail didn't feel that comfortable. Just in the future, that's something that we should probably take a look at and think about.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to note. They were going to put us right next to the BPD, but we just wanted for that kind of balance, at least some separation. There were not many spaces left in the future, which doesn't mean that we're antipodal or on the opposite sides of the BPD. It's just to ensure that understanding that there is that kind of safe space, because we put out complaints for people to fill out if they want to.
The last time, it wasn't last year, but whenever the last time was before that we did it, we were across Adeline. So that was quite a bit of separation. So it sounds like you were closer this time.
Well, we were, I would say like 150, 200 feet, but there were probably 2 or 3 booths across the street and then several on our side. So you could see, but it was at a distance, but it was close enough that you could see the tent, each of our booths. It was a matter of available slots. There were some programming issues with them reserving a slot for us, essentially.
Okay, I guess that might explain why I wasn't told beforehand where it was, even though I had asked her. Usually they had let us know.
That's right. There was no spots left.
Okay.
Yeah, those limited spots. So that's just something that happened on their end, but they did a good job with trying to make up for that and getting us the tent cover, and we were trying to move away from a lot of loud music and generators too, so that was part of the issue. But that's a good notation from board member Moore. Are there any other comments from board members? So I'm not seeing any hands raised. So let's go on to the director's report.
Thank you, Chair. There have been no new complaints filed since the last meeting. I told you that I would get back to you about the reason for the tolling in the Alta Bates case. And that was not in accordance with our regs, but it's under POBRA and under 3304 D, excuse me, one of the exceptions of, one of the reasons to toll is if the act, omission, or other allegation of misconduct is also the subject of a criminal investigation or criminal prosecution. So that there's not a criminal investigation of the officers. There's a criminal investigation of the underlying incident.
Do you mind me following up with a question, Director Lee? So that's the underlying incident, as in
what happened.
Okay.
Right. With the death of Mr. Gaines.
Right. There was things that happened before the BPD arrived on the scene.
Well, I don't know that, but
okay. Okay. I think I know what you're saying. So underlying a criminal investigation of parties not affiliated with the BPD.
Right.
Is that an appropriate assumption? Okay. And so that is that an appropriate basis for tolling them? It sounds like it is. It doesn't have to be a criminal investigation of BPD.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Calavita has her hand raised.
Yes, it's about this tolling. So Director Lee, you said that's in POBRA, in the Police Officers Bill of Rights.
Right.
But it sounds like this tolling didn't involve a police officer.
Well,
So
there's still, I mean, part of the issue is there's an ongoing criminal investigation that, and so it's been difficult for, let me just put it this way, without revealing too much, it's actually to our advantage to have this told for the time being.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Board Member Levine?
You're muted.
I just found the section, but well, that was my question. What's the rationale? Because I'm missing that, but I'll drop it for now.
Thank you. Any other questions on the issue?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
I understand there's still an ongoing investigation. Has the district attorney made any pronouncement about whether they plan to bring charges against the officers or not?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to thank all the board members who participated in staffing the Juneteenth table. I'm sorry. I actually am so old fashioned. I have an answering machine and I thought it was, the volume was turned off and it was beeping at me. Again, I appreciate, all that effort, and extra effort, and it is important to get out there. And I do hope that once you have a new director and more staff, that outreach, more targeted and organized and deliberate outreach can happen. Because it is true that for the many 40 years of the PRC's existence, you could run into a lot of people who had never heard of it. And so we do want to get the word out about this office and the Police Accountability Board. I want to remind people, the NACOL conference is September 11th to 15th in Fort Worth, Texas. I believe we're going to have money for 2 staff and 2 board members, so people should think about who would like to attend. I think usually we give the chair first dibs, so maybe the chair could think about it, and maybe by the next meeting, let me know if you plan to go, and then we'll see how many slots there are. And if people think they're interested, think about it and then think about whether you're interested. And then we'll have to figure out some way of selecting if we have more than 2 people who want to go.
Where is that being held again?
Fort Worth,
Fort Worth, Texas. Okay.
Texas.
So, and what are the dates?
September 11th through 15th.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's all I have for today. I see Board Member Owen's hand is raised.
I just had a quick question on what's going on with the budget. When does it get finalized?
It will be finalized on June 28th.
Okay. Has there been like a first meeting on the budget?
There have been
the full council.
There have been 2 required public hearings, and I'm glad you raised this, because I'm not sure that I reported this, that our request was for 2 additional staff, and one of them made it into the analyst position is in what's called tier 1. The other position is the second investigator position is in tier 2. And tier 1 also includes the additional funds for an outside consultant to assist with policy issues, as well as hiring a consultant to lead us through a strategic planning process, and another consultant to conduct a performance evaluation of your permanent director, which would be, I would imagine, not this coming fiscal year, but the one after that, after there's enough performance to be evaluated. So those are in tier 1. And the city manager's recommendation to the council has been to fund all the tier 1 requests. So it will be the council's decision as to whether they want to, not fund. I mean, they could go back to the baseline budget. I'm talking overall, not ours. I mean, they could go to ours, but I'm talking in general terms, they could go to the baseline budget and say, well, actually, we want to cut from here and then add things from tier 2 instead, or they could still decide they're going to move things out of tier 1 and they might think other tier 2 items that have been identified are more important. So that's where it stands right now, and the final decision will be made on the 28th. And I don't remember if the budget committee is going to have another meeting, and maybe I can put the chief on the spot. She might.
Yeah, actually, they have a meeting tomorrow, 10 o'clock,
Okay.
10 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
And
Board Member Ramsey, is that your hand raised from before?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I'll lower.
That's okay.
Great.
Okay, that's it for me, Chair.
Alrighty. Thank you, Director Lee. And now we have Chief Lewis's report. Thank you, Chief Lewis.
Thank you. Good evening. So I wanted to start off by giving some information on 2 cases of interest that occurred since the last meeting. The first was a shooting that occurred at Channing and 6th Street on June 13th. At about 5:30 p.m., we received several calls about a shooting in the area of 6th and Channing, responded and did locate a juvenile male that had a gunshot wound to his neck. Several witnesses came forward and gave us information that a group of people were arguing and that they heard a gunshot. And then the group dispersed, but the victim remained on scene. He was transported to Highland and did survive that gunshot wound, and our detectives are currently working on that case. The second case I wanted to talk a little bit about was assault and vandalism that recently occurred at the McDonald's at University in Shattuck. That was on the 17th, just after noon. BPD responded to a report of an assault inside the McDonald's where the suspect had taken eyeglasses off of the victim's face and then also taken her cell phone. When she tried to get her belongings back, she was punched in the face. That individual then took the belongings and ran out of the store. About 10 minutes later, he punched someone else or struck someone else with a construction hard hat, a 78-year-old man. Our bike officers were in the area, were able to respond. They did locate the suspect. He was arrested and he's been charged with multiple crimes, including robbery and elder abuse that inflicted great bodily injury. Next, I want to talk a little bit, give an update on where we are with our sworn staffing levels. We have several pending retirements and resignations that are in front of us, but our current staffing level is as follows. We have 150 officers in solo officer status, 4 officers in our field training program, 1 who is near the end, the other 3 just graduated recently from an academy, so are early in the process. We do have 1 officer that's currently in the academy, and I've made 5 conditional offers for officers that will enter an academy in on July 5th. And finally, I did want to talk about 2 community engagement events. One, as Chair Chang just spoke about it, and Director Lee, the department did participate in the Juneteenth Festival. We were happy to be a part to support that event. From what I understand, that event went very well. Was happy to hear that members of the department were able to connect with PAB board, with the board members. I think that's really valuable. And I very much respect board member Moore's sort of comment about having the booth separate. I do want to say that I want to extend an offer if there's willingness or interest in the board to work cooperatively with our Community Services Bureau and consider doing some kind of engagement or outreach event collaboratively. I think it's important. There's tremendous value in us being able to work collaboratively and respectfully, and sort of be able to sit down with the community and explain our processes. I think it lends more credibility to what we're all trying to do, what our responsibilities are. My responsibility for the community is to provide a high functioning, equitable, fair, lawful police department. We have to be held accountable by an accountability board to make sure that we are following what the values of our community are. And I think the community being able to see how we work together and support each other. We also have, another set of social media resources, right? We have our friends are friends, and having an event like this may be able to increase the outreach. I very much respect the fact that there are folks that may not feel comfortable when an officer is, in a uniform, or an officer of the police department is represented somewhere and you're trying to explain the work that the PAB does. I absolutely respect and understand that. But I think if we can find the more ways we find to connect and work together, the better we can all do our jobs, and the better we can support our community. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, the other community engagement event that I want to talk about is this afternoon. Several members of the department were able to participate in the Special Olympics torch run. So our department is an active supporter of Special Olympics. We do a couple events every year, including a polar plunge and a bike ride. But today we did the torch run. So we were able to take the torch from Albany Police, run it through our city, and pass it to the University Police Department. And that torch makes its way all the way across to the opening ceremony for the Special Olympics. So it's a really nice event, and I really appreciate our department being able to participate in that. And that's all I had for tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief Lewis. It looks like we have Vice Chair Mizell has his hand up.
Chief Lewis, it's good to see you. It's been a little while. I may have missed you at the June 8th meeting when I was absent. I truly hear and respect your words on collaboration. However, that to me brings up a really important question. Several meetings ago, as you'll recall, I had asked you if we could have participation from the department in our review of the impact statements and policy 709. Your answer at the time was, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but your answer was you were not the expert on that issue, but you would have someone in the department who has followed the issue closely participate with us. That did happen with, I believe, Captain Roleri participate on the subcommittee with myself and Board Member Moore at the subcommittee. And again, I've participated and I've worked, I believe, collaboratively and cooperatively with Captain Roleri in review of policy in the past, but the captain threatened to simply not participate because of the order of the items of the meeting. And then after we acquiesced to his order of items, he informed us that the department had no intention of changing any words of the impact statements, which was one of the primary issues for the subcommittee and ultimately for the board. And for me, it was striking to then find out a few meetings later and hear from Lieutenant Rittenhouse that the department actually was super willing to collaborate on the very issue that the captain had said they would not change a single word of the impact statements, and when the captain threatened to simply not participate because of the order of the agenda. I have to ask you, is this mixed messages? Is this a miscommunication in the department? But those things don't square with wanting to collaborate. And as the person who was chairing the actual meetings, where the captain said point blank that he would not change any of the words of the impact statements, regardless of our review, is that collaboration to BPD's mind? Is there something I'm missing in the timeline? But I found Lieutenant Rittenhouse's comment, which apparently are your words, which he presented to us, very confusing based on Captain Roleri's participation or lack thereof at the subcommittee level. I don't think that's collaboration, but I'd love your answer on the order of events there and whether I'm missing something.
Well, collaboration means working collaboratively. So it means hearing each other, understanding the different viewpoints, and trying to land on somewhere that's reasonable and right. I think there's an extremely great body of evidence of the department and the PAB, former PRC, being able to work through policies and land somewhere where if we don't get close, we don't get in complete agreement, we get pretty close, and then they can go to council to have a final policy agreement. I don't know the context of the comment that we can't change anything. It's possible he was referring to the fact that if we submit an item and depending on timing, whether we can submit edits to it or not, or whether we can do what we did, which is write a memo that's a response. So the PAB provided me a letter that said, hey, here's the things we'd like to see different in the impact statements. We provided a response that said, hey, here's the things we've changed or can change or we can work on. That's how I see collaboration is. We hear and understand very clearly the things that you're asking for us to do differently. You give space and time for us to explain from an operational standpoint or an equipment standpoint or a legal standpoint, our analysis. You give us space and time to do that, and then we figure out what the right thing to do is. And when we can't decide, we get help deciding. Right, a recommendation goes from the board, a recommendation goes from the department, ultimately to council, and then decisions made. Ideally, we get to a place in these working meetings where we've pretty much worked out all the nuts and bolts, right? Council is very busy and shouldn't have, hopefully isn't having to make those things, right? We're not giving them what we ended up with this because of the ordinance, the state law, multiple state laws, multiple timelines. We ended up with something that was extremely confusing for a lot of different people I know that Captain Roleri had started in the very beginning with the processes with the PRC and the policies. And that's my comment to you. That last meeting was like, I don't want to start saying things about dates and timing and what got submitted and what didn't, because I'm not following that project. And that's why I wanted you to work with him. Again, I don't know the context of why he said what he said, but you have my commitment as the head of the agency that we want to work collaboratively. I want productive collaboration, though. I want there to be space for everybody to hear and understand and work through things. And I think we need that. We need that to be able to find resolution around these and be able to move forward, because if we are constantly at odds and trying to figure out what the rules are, it's challenging for officers. It's challenging for officers to try to figure out how they implement them, how they carry out a policy, the direction from council, the direction of the law, how they carry those things out when things are convoluted, when there's a lot of information and detail on that. And I know Captain Roleri, years and years of sort of policy work in our department, it's always highly focused on what's the things that how does it make sense to put information, where do people sort of expect to see things. And I talked to Director Lee a little bit about this, about impact statements were seen as sort of satisfying the 7 requirements, explaining the tool, what the quantity is, what the type of tool it was, how many we had, what the costs were, and then how you use it was in a use policy. And then that's where, and our guiding use policy for all of our use of force is policy 300. And so, that was, I think, some of the resistance to including some of the use pieces in the impact statements. Right or wrong, we're all trying to figure this out right now. Every single jurisdiction in the state of California is trying to figure out how to apply 481. Some departments have like a 2-page document. Some departments have a 70, 80-page document like we have. I heard San Jose's is even longer than that. So this is like fresh territory for us all. And I've had many conversations with Director Lee. I was like, we know we need to work together to figure out timelines and expectations and what goes where. And some of the comments last night at council about wanting to see more about the impacts, the civil liabilities and safety and wellness and things like that in the policies. Like, I want to hear from the PAB about, like, hey, what do you think is appropriate in there? And because, like, we're business, we're about business usually. Like, hey, here's how we use it, here's when we deploy it, this is what we think tactically and whatever. Like, I want to hear from the accountability board, like, hey, this is sort of our sense of what the community feels like is the impact, and how do we figure out how to get that language in there? How do we check with the city attorney's office to make sure that we're putting in there isn't exposing the city unnecessary liability, things like that. That's kind of sort of the partnership that I'm hoping to see in all of this.
Well, I appreciate that response, Chief. And to be very clear, I am in no way blaming the department for the many issues that have taken place in this process. Obviously, that is not nearly all on the department. Most of it probably is just based on these timelines, based on the difficulties of coordinating. I understand all of that. That does, however, not change the fact that Captain Rolleri was the person, in my understanding, that you specifically placed on the subcommittee as the person with knowledge in the department who had followed the ordinance from its inception, where I was also on the subcommittee working with the captain at the time, and we did work more collaboratively on that subcommittee. And his answer was nothing. Essentially, again, this is a paraphrase, nothing can be changed. And I understand the department may not recognize every possible, as the captain said, every single possible thing that might impact someone. But to say, for instance, the M4 is an inanimate object, when the definition of use requires that it's being used. So the fact that it's inanimate means nothing. And to hear the captain say to that we won't change it. And to now hear that it can be changed after the board already spent the time, the energy between staff, board members to have a subcommittee meeting where we could have addressed it then, to now have to go back after it's been approved by council, the impact statements, as you know, where it's now out of the board's hand. We no longer have the power beforehand. It's always a recommendation, but we had it within that period, which is now gone. I don't think that really is collaboration. I respect what you're saying about the difficulties of the process. I hear all of that. But the bottom line to me was there was not participation on the captain's end. He threatened to just leave the meeting if we didn't follow the order. And his order, I should mention for the record, was he did want us to go through 709 issues because he felt like that dealt with the state laws and we were on a short timeline on the impact statement, so we should focus on the issues with the impact statements. Well, we focused on the issues, the biggest issue with the impact statements, and the response was, we will change nothing. And ultimately, Chief, that is your captain. You are the person who I assume asked him to serve in that capacity. I appreciate your words today, but I hope that is really something that can be reflected in our work going forward. Because if the standard is going to be, well, if the board doesn't act in the exact way we want, we simply won't participate. And then when the board does act in the way we'd like, we'll just say no and wait for council to take action. That is not collaboration. And I have to stress it because, again, council placed us in the specific role in the ordinance. This is not me imagining a role for ourselves that we don't have. This is council's ordinance, as you know. There's many issues, not all fine with the department, as you know. But the bottom line is Captain Rolleri is your captain. He's the person you asked to do it. And those were the answers we got as a board at the time. And they simply do not square with an answer that came from Lieutenant Rittenhouse meetings later that you are willing to collaborate. It did not happen in that issue. And I hope you can recognize that on this particular issue, it did not happen. The department was not collaborating on that issue at that time. That may change in the future. And I hope that can be recognized as a fact and not merely something the board is making up when it's literally on tape.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mizell. And I appreciate the engagement here on this issue, and I'm hearing the frustration and the concern with that experience in the subcommittee. As Chief Lewis has noted, the department has put its good faith behind this, and moving forward, it's very important again to have that collaboration and good faith engagement. And so that's what we're looking forward to. And this is an example of something to in the future, whether it be due to miscommunication or a perception around roles, that there be a fully engaged and collaborative type of engagement where both parties, which actually is not really two parties, it's multiple parties when you include the public, are able to have a say in the outcome. And in these subcommittee meetings, that's why it's so important to really have those positive and constructive communications. And that's what we're looking forward to in the future. And what I'm hearing from Chief Lewis is that she has her, she's put her support behind that. And so that's what our expectation is moving forward as well. Chief Lewis, did you want to respond at all?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And so are there other comments or questions for Chief Lewis? We want to bear in mind time. Okay, thank you. So moving forward on the subcommittee reports, fair and impartial policing implementation.
We have not met since our last full PAB meeting, and so I don't have anything to report. We're attempting to schedule our next meeting. I think I did mention last time that the subcommittee has discussed and approved the idea of submitting a report, maybe biannually, maybe quarterly, to council on the implementation progress. And so we'll be working on that going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Board Member Calavita. I'm going to take a break, and Vice Chair Mizell will take over.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to item 8B, the Director Search Subcommittee. Board Member Levine and Board Member Moore as well were at the panel.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't think we've actually had a meeting of the subcommittee since our last PAB meeting. Yes, we had interviews today, and we wrote a letter to the mayor, council, city manager, deputy city manager. Director Lee passed it out to all of us, and so one of our complaints had to do with getting materials in advance of the panels. We did get materials in advance. We got them depending on got our signed authorization or compliance with confidentiality submitted to us by the buyers. Then we got the confidential information about the candidates. So we had more preparation than I was afraid we would have. And that was helpful. And we had meaningful and exhausting panel interviews today that Chip and Board Member Moore and I participated. We were on the same panel. There were two panels, and the two panels were the PAB with an addition of an outside oversight expert, and the community panel. It's true, as Ms. Polotnik said, that she and the other public member of our subcommittee were not selected, permitted, whatever word you want to use. They weren't on the panels, either panel. And that had been something that was in that contract. Nevertheless, it was effective, and Ms. Polotnik also said in the public statement that the city manager was going to select 3 out of the 6 we interviewed. I'm not sure that's correct because the panels made recommendations. We conferred, we made recommendations, and I assumed those would be the ones submitted to the city council. The precise question wasn't asked and answered in our meetings today, so I can't say more than I just said. But anyway, I thought that it was a worthwhile effort. I was grateful to be on the panel, and the rest, I think I hope I didn't overstep that confidentiality by saying what I just said, but I think this was all part of what was publicly discussed prior. So that we'll stay tuned is what I say, which is what I'm doing. See what's next. I'm assuming that what we recommended will go to the city council, but we'll see.
Thank you, Board Member Levine, and I'd like to short more to apologize to the board. I was unfortunately not able to participate in the panels. I had a personal issue arise at an unfortunate time today. But I am very thankful for you, Board Member Levine, and Board Member Moore for your participation, and of course for the public members as well. A question on Board Member Owens?
It's just a quick question. Has there been a timeline established going forward? So, kind of, even if it's not set in stone, but just kind of a fuzzy timeline of, they hope to go to council. I mean, do they plan to go to council with it prior to council taking their August break, or is it going to happen after? Or
Director Lee.
I believe that the city manager reported to the council that they will present a candidate before their August break.
Are you saying a candidate or
candidates? Sorry.
Okay.
Well,
because I thought it was
actually a couple things have to happen. Yes, the 3 have to be presented, and then I'm not clear on whether the council or some portion of the council will do further interviews, but then somehow it has to get narrowed down to a person whose contract then needs to be approved by the council.
Yeah. But the narrowing to the selected person is going to be performed and decided by council.
Right.
That's clear, I hope.
Oh yeah. They get to decide.
Yeah.
Sure.
So is the expectation that the negotiation of the contract will happen before August?
Yes.
Director Lee, do you know if who selects the 3 finalists? Is it the way Board Member Levine said, that it'll be sort of a mathematical based on the ratings, or?
I don't have any more information than she has.
So Board Member Levine, did you 2 panels get together and say, okay, these are the 3 we recommend?
Yes.
Okay.
And there was unanimity, not with precision, but okay.
John is doing this.
All right, never mind.
Chip
but that's
doing this.
Good to know that you all have chosen 3.
Yes.
Okay.
But who you all is referring to, I guess I'm not supposed to say. I don't know. Oh, well, never mind. I apologize if I misspoke.
Thank you, Board Member Levine. See another question. I think we can go ahead and move then to the regulations subcommittee.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Director Lee.
Yes. So Your subcommittees are by definition temporary ad hoc subcommittees that have a term of a year or that expire automatically after a year unless they are unless they're renewed. So the regulation subcommittee was formed on July 7th, 2021. Your next meeting isn't till July, the next regular meeting is not till July 13th. So it would be appropriate to, you know, we don't know if the regulation subcommittee needs to meet again, but in my view, why not renew the subcommittee just in case? Because you don't want to have something come up and then you don't have anywhere to send it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Are there any other concerns from the current subcommittee members, regulation subcommittee, or questions about that? So thank you. I didn't realize that it was ad hoc and it expires at a year. Thanks for explaining that. Okay, so what do we need to do? Do we have a motion or?
Yes, somebody needs to make a motion, please.
Someone raise a motion to renew the term of the subcommittee for another year, regulation subcommittee.
I'll
So
second
moved.
it. And I'll
Did you-
second it.
Okay,
Chair, did you move?
I did not move. I don't think I can I?
no, well, you can, but if, I think that I'm going to say that was a motion by Calavita, a second by Levine.
Excellent.
Fine.
Yes. Great. All right. So moving forward,
Sorry, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Chair, I think this may be part of the agenda where I need to do it. I was going to ask if I could be removed from the impact statement / controlled equipment subcommittee.
thank you for, and you know, we are understand your withdrawal from that, and of course we appreciate your hard work on that issue as well. And I'm saddened that you're leaving it, but you know, I know you've put in lots of great work, and I'm looking forward to other work on subcommittees with you. But is that the appropriate procedure?
I don't think permission is needed, and I think what by board member Mizell indicating that he wishes to step down, that's fine.
Sure. He's just providing notice. He doesn't need to get approval.
Yes.
For doing so.
Okay.
Okay.
You didn't vote on the motion to renew the regulation subcommittee, so
I'm sorry.
you
Yeah.
ask if there's any objection.
Yeah. Should we just do it by consensus then? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay.
you can.
Great. We can do it by consensus. You know, are there any objections to renewing the regulation subcommittee for another year? Not hearing or seeing any, so moved.
Thank you.
Okay. And moving on to old business, and this is, we have, so it's 8:04, marking the time here. 9A is topic at issue here. So proposed equipment impact statements, use policies, military equipment policy, and annual use report of 1 hour. We're going to consider the communicating to the city council more specifics regarding the shortcomings. We had some updates from Tuesday too, which I think is actually that might be the best way to go.
So yes, because really 9A is now moot.
Yeah.
So, Chair, do you want me to just start off?
Sure. You want to
Yeah.
review the email you sent previously?
I emailed the board this afternoon with the council's action, and for the public's information, it could be found in the supplemental materials online for this meeting. So and I knew that at this meeting, we weren't exactly sure what we'd be talking about. But so I agendized everything, just in case. So the council approved the controlled equipment impact statements and policy 303 on control devices and techniques as revised by Councilmember Harrison. And also I attached to that email the Councilmember Harrison and Councilmember Han's revision to the impact statements. And so that means there is no more work for better or worse. There's no more work for this board to do on the impact statements in 303. As far as the annual equipment use report, they referred it. They didn't really refer it because we're supposed to have a role, but based on advice from the city attorney, which was different from what I had thought, there's 60 days from the time that the anyway, they said it was 60 days from July 26, 2022. I was going to say 60 days from the time that the impact statements and actually, okay, 60 days from the time the equipment impact statements and use policies are approved. So the use policies, not all the use policies are approved. They will be approved by July 26th. They're giving the board 60 days from that approval date to approve the use report, the annual equipment use report. And then the third thing the board did was to refer all the other policies relevant to controlled equipment, and I read those as everything other than a policy 303 that's referred to in the appendix of the equipment impact statements, as well as 709. Those were referred to the board and the police department for review by July 26th. So I believe that what you should do now is figure out how you're going to handle these. Obviously, the last item you want to take up first because that's the most pressing. And it also probably makes the most sense to do it by a subcommittee. And you now have one person, Board Member Moore, on the subcommittee. So it would be appropriate to add other people if they wish to be on the subcommittee to do that review. And then the other thing in terms of timing is your July meetings are July 13th and 27th. So obviously 27th is going to be too late. So either the subcommittee has to have something for the full board to approve by July 13th, or we might have to have a special meeting, July 20th being a logical date. That's a Wednesday, which most people can make. So, so that is sort of structurally what's going on.
Okay. Thank you. That's super helpful. I want to put a pin on a flag on number 3.
Chair Chang, your voice kind of, we're losing you.
Oh, that's kind of odd. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but you got soft all of a sudden. Or is it just me? Is anybody else having a problem hearing you?
I think it's just you.
Okay, it's me. Sorry, never mind.
Okay.
Let me turn my volume up, maybe.
All right, great. So
okay, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Thank you for that overview. And you know, I see that Board Member Ramsey has hand up. I want to put a pin in number 3, subcommittee bolstering Board Member Moore for his hard work. There's a couple of people that sound like they may be interested in joining. July 13th is, you know, there's still some time. That's what, like 3 weeks, a little over, 3 weeks basically. So some of that work has already been done in some sense, and Board Member Moore has some experience here. And so I encourage folks to join that subcommittee, and let's take care of this as soon as possible. Board Member Ramsey has his hand raised.
I was just going to volunteer for the subcommittee.
Excellent. Okay. That's what I was thinking, Board Member Ramsey. And you haven't, I don't want to call names, but there's some folks that had indicated interest and have been engaged on this issue. Would they like to also volunteer to work with Board Member Ramsey and just work through this quite quickly. I've worked with Board Member Ramsey a number of times, and he's a pleasure to work with on subcommittees. So that can be an important selling point. It is kind of similar to Lexipol. Board Member Leftwich has indicated interest in the past of Lexipol work, but I don't know what her schedule is like. And also Board Member Calavita had previously been quite engaged on this issue and is knowledgeable on it. But I don't want to voluntold folks. I want to see if they have an interest. So we have 2 so far.
Can't take it on, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being honest. Others?
So to be clear, this is to review policy 709, as well as some of the policies that are referred to in 709. Is that correct?
I think so. The way I'm thinking, that's probably not incorrect. Just the way I've been thinking about it is the policies attached to the impact statements, which could be the same thing.
Well, we'll review.
I mean, policy 709 is a policy in and of itself.
Yes, I know, but I thought that there were references in it to.
I haven't, I confess, I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't looked at it lately. Let me look at it right now.
Okay, so, I mean, we had a 2-person subcommittee before, didn't we?
Yes, you did.
So it could move forward with board members Moore and Ramsey. In some ways, it's easier to schedule with fewer people.
That's true. I'm sorry, did Board Member Leftwich not volunteer? What did you, maybe I
No,
misheard.
she said she could not.
She could not, okay.
And I cannot either, but I'm proposing that 2 people may be sufficient.
I think it's probably okay. I was just thinking in terms of the short time frame, but Board Member Ramsey is, and also Board Member Moore are, I think I'm sure will be proficient in this. And are there thoughts from Board Member Ramsey and Moore if they need a 3rd person to assist with this? I think it's a fairly discrete process. You could come back to us and say, listen, there's references to other policy that is much broader and we think we need to address them and you need assistance too.
If I can add, Chair, I also would like to see if we could pull in help from Mr. John Lindsay Poland. I know that we're not allowed to officially have him as part of the subcommittee, but as a resource, I know he's been invaluable with the process.
Director Lee, we've done that in the past, right?
Yeah, I don't think you need to get permission from the full board on that. I mean, you did have him help you beforehand.
Right.
In your prior discussions, subcommittee discussions.
So can you remind me, so bringing him back on board and what's the official kind of?
Well, what, I mean, it's not officially bringing him back on board because as I've said, you can't appoint members, public members of subcommittees because you haven't created that pool yet. But it is possible to allow public members to participate by suspending the rules. And
so the suspension of the rules for participation, given his subject matter expertise in this area.
Right. He obviously would not have a vote, but.
Okay, that's something to remember. He wouldn't have a vote. So Board Member Moore, that's a good reminder. I think you could request that he return in that same kind of status.
I understand he will be away for some days, the first part of July. So,
okay.
But you know, as Ms. Saganor reminded us in her email, these subcommittee meetings are open, and we often just make it a work session where everybody can participate. They don't, of course, have voting rights, but
Okay, so that's that major limiting factor when they're not a formal public member. So great reminder, Board Member Moore, and we have Vice Chair Mizell and then Board Member Owens.
Thank you, Chair. I mentioned some of those applicable policies will include the rifle operation policy, the policies pertaining to different of the non-lethal projectile weapons. So it's definitely, I'm glad we have the opportunity to review. I just wanted to stress and hope to hear from the subcommittee members whether the chief's commitment tonight and commitment before tonight of collaboration is actually true. I think we saw tonight the department, I'm saying the department because the chief is the one who spoke, refused to even acknowledge the lack of collaboration at our subcommittee, or at least when I was on it. And I would just ask that if they report out on their experience and if it's any different than mine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're taking the chief at her word, and I assume it may be Captain Roleri is returning as a representative of the police department, and will engage in a constructive manner to ensure that this work is done in the timeframes that are required, so we don't exceed the timeframes and violate any rules or laws. Board Member Owens.
I just have a general question. I know that on a formal subcommittee, when you have citizens, they have to be residents of the city of Berkeley. So when you have a subcommittee and you're promoting people to panelists, does that same requirement apply?
No.
Question, I don't think so, but
No.
as Director Lee, as you're shaking your head.
I don't think so.
And
No.
I think
We
it's
have outside experts coming all the time from other cities, even other states
Right.
to subcommittees.
That's true.
That's right. We've had subject matter experts coming in by Zoom on a range of issues like use of force and warrants, et cetera. And remember, they're non-voting members. So that's a good question. Board Member Owens, but the distinction there is that they don't have a vote. They can contribute their subject matter expertise as a reference. And that's the main distinction there. Okay, good. Any other comments or questions on this? So this looks good. We've got someone raising their hand. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to ask if we could hear from the Deputy City Attorney on this, and if they had any comments on the July 26th deadline, especially as it pertains to the state law and policy 709.
That's right. That's a good reminder. We have the Deputy City Attorney, Madam Mattis. Is she available?
I'm here. I guess I my office provided guidance during the City Council meeting yesterday. I don't know if there's anything further that needs to be said regarding what Council adopted.
Yeah, could I ask why the board didn't get that type of guidance at an earlier stage in the process? I know there had been some emails sent between staff of council members in the city attorney's office that seemed to answer pertinent questions that the board could have used. So I was just curious to that as well.
I will just, I don't know if you're referencing anything specific, but I'll just say our office is available to PAB to answer questions as needed. And we have been in frequent communication with the director regarding questions and have attempted to provide timely responses to all of the questions that have been presented to us. So we are and remain available to provide guidance as needed. If there are questions that remain, if there are issues that need to be resolved by a certain deadline, we strive to provide guidance as needed.
And you certainly have on many issues. So I do want to commend and make sure that is clear. But I do think there are discrepancies. And as we've discussed, this process has been, I think, difficult for many parties in the city. But I do think there are some answers that we could have used earlier. And again, I think probably happened as there was a direct question that was answered just on the spot or close to. There's no issue whatsoever with that. I just wanted to make sure that any information that could be pertinent to the board gets back to us at the same time it gets to other members of the city. But thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you. And we're now engaged on this timing issue with all the clarification from the city council and with deputy city council as well, deputy city attorney, sorry. Moving forward then, that's good. We've got the two members. Do we need to do any type of motion on the two members of the subcommittee? I'm sorry, the addition of board member Ramsey?
You appoint them with the consent of the board. So no formal motion is needed.
Sure. No, okay. No formal motion on adding subcommittee members from the board itself. And I'm not seeing or hearing any objections. I'm sure there wouldn't be any. Board member Ramsey, thank you for your service and for volunteering, and board member Moore as well. Okay. So we do still have a potentially meaty topic that's scheduled for an hour. It is 8:20. So item B, continue reviewing draft of proposed permanent regulations for handling investigations and complaints. So what is the best way to proceed with this?
I'm happy to pull up the draft.
Okay, thank you.
And I was reviewing your discussion at the last meeting, and really you didn't get very far. You were talking about board initiated investigations. Then you talked about board, and by the way, for the public, the draft is on the May 25th agenda packet.
Can I just ask, aren't we having a special meeting on this, and have we decided if the reg subcommittee is going to meet again?
We haven't. So I haven't tried to get the regulation subcommittee. Well, I haven't tried to get the regulation subcommittee together because I wasn't sure about that. And the other thing is that, and that I didn't send anything out because Lieutenant Montgomery is on vacation. He was gone most of June and won't be back till July 5th.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought that it was possible we would have a little slice of time tonight, and that's why I agendized it. I didn't know how. I thought we might have a lot of time if council decided everything, or
Sure.
a little bit of time, which we do now.
We've hit 8:30.
But are we having a special meeting dedicated to this?
I didn't hear back from everybody about their availability either next Wednesday, the 29th, or Wednesday, July 6th. So maybe if I could get a sense of that now.
Sure. If I failed to respond to you, I apologize. I thought I had.
No, I think you did.
Okay.
I don't think I'll name names. But
Sure. So Wednesday the 29th. Or what are the other dates? What are the times on the 29th?
well, we could start earlier if people want to, but I think we should just nail down a date first.
Okay, the 29th, I can start earlier, as early as that's a Wednesday, right? So yeah, as early as 4.
Okay. Let's go this way. Who's available on June 29th in the evening? Let's say at least by 7.
So that includes myself as well.
So I see everybody, not Chip, board member Moore, yes or no? Yes. Okay, so that, I think that's everybody except board member Harris. So that's a good possible date. And then how about July 6th? Who is available?
July 6th is also.
one maybe, and people shaking their.
I know I replied to you. I just don't remember right
Okay.
now. I
Okay.
did.
I don't remember what people said.
I'm not available.
You did reply. Okay.
Neither
So,
am I, Kathy. I might have been before, but I can't make it now. There's something popped up.
okay. All right. So July 6th is out. June 29th is a great date. And okay, who can start as early as 4?
That's me.
Okay, 5, 6.
We can't see Board Member Owens whether she has her hand up.
I don't think she's raising it. Okay, Board Member Owens, you can't meet till 7? Is that
7
correct?
o'clock.
Pardon me?
7 o'clock.
7. Okay, so 7. Okay, Board Member. All right. So, okay, save the date, June 29th at 7 o'clock. All right, does that mean you don't want to talk about regulations tonight? At all?
Yes.
It's up to you. Okay,
Yes.
We should. So it's 8:30. Shall we?
that's fine. I just thought maybe add another hour to talk about it, but
So is that yes or no?
That
means no, right? Yes means no here. No.
We need to talk about regs.
Oh, Board Member Calavita would like to speak about this.
I mean, there's a lot of material. Don't you all think we need to do it? Otherwise, we wouldn't need a special meeting.
I agree.
Yeah, this is my assumption of what she intended by that comment. So I think if it's 8:30 now, shall we go put the train back on the tracks for another 30 to 45 minutes? That puts us at 9 o'clock, 9:15. And then try to have a stop there. Or Board Member Calavita, her expression suggests like, no, you should keep going.
No, I don't know. It's up to everybody. I
would
just thought we should have a regular meeting go as long as it was scheduled for.
I would suggest going an hour,
Okay.
throwing that out.
Okay, so an hour that'd put us at 9:30, which is within the kind of general range of our meetings. Okay. So
Just early.
Early, yes. A concerted effort for a hard stop,
Yes.
by an hour, so that then we also have to do public comment and then adjourn. So that could take another like 10, 15 minutes. All right. So do you mind pulling up the?
I do not mind. Let me just get organized here.
Members of the public is on your May 25th.
Right.
And I happen to have it open, so if it helps, it's page 15 of your packet,
Thank you.
if I'm correct in my pagination here. It says
I think so.
May 25th.
Of May 25th.
May 25th packet, page 15.
Director Lee, do you know where are we still on the definitions?
Yes. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Yes, you do see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you make it just a tad bigger, the font?
How's that?
Much better.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. So
we were here, and then we we're having a discussion about board-initiated complaints. Then there was this long discussion, a very fruitful discussion, I thought, with Lieutenant Montgomery about, it sort of went off into what seemed fair to officers in terms of how involved the board got in the beginning. He raised concern about, hey, the board thinks that, that something should be looked into, and is it fair that the people who are initiating the complaint and already think that something is wrong would be the people who are hearing it. But then I think we also talked about guardrails and how could be done in a way that feels okay to the officers in terms of their due process rights. So, and there was a question at the end that Board Member Owens raised was, does everybody agree that the board does not have a role in investigations? Because many people, I think that had been mentioned a few times. So that had been commented on several times by various board members. Board Member Calvita?
Yeah, so I'd like to make a distinction and a comment. The distinction is the distinction between the board triggering or requesting an investigation of fact-finding by the staff, by the investigator, by the DPA office. And then, so that's different from the board filing a complaint. It's what we've been doing recently, asking the staff, for example, to investigate the Alta Bates situation. And I don't know that anybody has trouble with that, including Lieutenant Montgomery. What he was concerned about was the DPA then coming back to the board, giving us information, and the board then deciding to file a complaint, because that seemed to the lieutenant to be saying that the board would then be biased in hearing the complaint because they've already they've already lodged the complaint. And towards the end of our discussion, Lieutenant Montgomery, there was discussion about, and Lieutenant Montgomery thought it would improve things if the DPA came back after the initial investigation, and if appropriate, recommend to the board that a complaint be initiated. Because in that case, the director would be recommending a complaint be filed, and that would not be the same person hearing the complaint. And so, according to Montgomery, that would improve things. And I actually think that's a really good way to go. It would be comparable to the DPA doing, at a different stage, of course, but comparable to them reporting recommendations and findings to us. But of course, this is just a recommendation to file a complaint. And so I just wanted to make the distinction clear between the board requesting that the staff initiate an investigation, fact-finding, as it's defined here in the definitions, that's distinct from the board filing a complaint, which is a later process. And in that later process, it would be upon the DPA's recommendation that a complaint be filed, thereby separating it out from, separating out the person who recommends that a complaint be filed from those of us hearing the complaint. And that's what I think makes sense. And, I also think that there's, there are guardrails. We talked about guardrails, but we're ahead of ourselves now because we're only in the definition stage. But later in the regulations, and the subcommittee members will know this, we set out a number of guardrails for when the board is involved in the complaint, involved in lodging a complaint or requesting an investigation. And it has to do with the seriousness of the potential misconduct, the timeliness. There's a whole series of things which Lieutenant Montgomery actually helped us construct. And so I think we have the guardrails in place that you'll see later when we get to it.
That's right. Thank you. That's a really good rendition. I just want to note this. I'm the chair of the Regulations Committee, and that really crystallizes and helps to focus us on that point of the DPA actually bringing a recommendation of whether or not to file a complaint. And I would agree that that makes sense to me, given the concerns raised and just my general experience with complaint processes in other contexts.
Could I just say that if people agree with that, we do need to figure out whether I assume if the board takes the recommendation of the director, it would be the board that files the complaint. So as a kind of as a pro forma thing, because I don't know here in definition number 14, whether a complaint initiated by the board is the appropriate phrasing, but I guess it's okay.
I mean, we can always add a complaint initiated by the board upon
the director's recommendation.
On the director's recommendation. So I think that makes sense to me. If we don't mind just punching that in right now, and then we can have a conversation on it.
Yeah.
Just so we move ahead, put that kind of flag in the ground. I do want to note that Board Member Owens has her hand raised. Thank you, Board Member Calavita, for that very clear review. Board Member Owens?
I agree with Board Member Calavita's summary of the discussion that we have. And I also agree that it makes sense that the director brings forth the complaint to allow that there's some separation, I'll say separation of duties. But I still don't like the comment that the complaint is initiated by the board. I thought we had a discussion about going to the council and having the director's authority modified so the director could bring this complaint forward, because there was some discussion about it that the director doesn't have the authority per the charter, but the charter did allow for the council to make additional to give the director additional authority. So I thought what we discussed was we would have the council give the director the authority to initiate that complaint when we do the fact finding. And that way that gets the board out of the whole complaint side of the process. And I think if we do that, I think that will work better.
Director Lee, how would that, is that something we refer back to the city council to request that type of amendment? What would that, how would that process function?
It would come as you would have to vote on it, and then it would be a request to council, a recommendation of council that they amend, I guess they'd have to adopt an ordinance authorizing that.
Ordinance authorizing, and Board Member Owens, let me make sure I understand what you're proposing here. Authorizing the DPA to have the authority to initiate directed investigations.
No.
Or
no.
Make a
That's
complaint.
not what I said. No.
Okay.
What I said was the director, when the board asked the director to do, I'll call it fact finding, and the director in that process of fact finding identifies something that potentially could be a complaint, that the director, when they bring us back the results of the fact finding, also recommends that a complaint is initiated against whomever. And at that point, it just becomes like a regular process of, doing a hearing, blah, 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 blah. But when we talked about this, the last board meeting, the response was the director doesn't have that authority. So we said we would go back to council. The way I personally see this working is that as we go through these regulations, because council has to approve these regulations, that as we go through these regulations, one of the things we say is we would like the council to give the director additional authority for XYZ. That way it's all in one pretty little package, the regulations and our ask for the director to have this authority, because it will also give the council some understanding of why we're asking the director to have that authority.
Okay. Did you want to propose a motion now just for that? I know you want to bundle it together, but for that specific issue you just raised?
No, I think we should just, if we agree that that's something that we are comfortable with, that, it's just part of our discussion of the regulations by the full board, and just something that we know that has to go forward when we with the regulations as we modify.
Okay. So the two could be kind of linked together, what Board Member Calavita just raised, and then Board Member Owens as a potential kind of direction for strategy on that issue. What are other members' comments on that?
Can I also throw something out? This is kind of not specific to that, but to the regulation. The director sent us a document. It was like a 2-page document. It's attached to this. And it kind of had what I felt like was kind of like the really relevant, meaty things that we struggle with in the regulation subcommittee. So I kind of would like to focus on those things, and the things like the definitions and stuff. I would like to throw it back on the other board members to go through just kind of those things and bring those back when we meet in our special meeting. Because otherwise, I mean, you know how long it took us to go through these regulations, page by page and line item by line item. We will be doing that with the full board for a long time. So I like to kind of throw it back on the full board to kind of go through it, but we stay focused on the things that we struggled with at the subcommittee level. I think that way we can move this thing forward a little faster.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And also the things that we're kind of zeroing in on are also issues because had components to them that Lieutenant Montgomery had kind of raised too. And also when he returns, we'll have more engagement on that issue with him. But right now we can work through those things that have been pre-flagged, so to speak, already.
And that's on those are on page 31 of our materials for tonight. That memo again.
Right. I wanted to ask Board Member Owens, she's referring to that memo, page 31 of tonight's packet. It's May 20th.
I believe that's what Board Member Owens is referencing. Is that what you're referencing?
I don't know what page it is. I'm just looking at, it's dated May 20th.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So how about we move forward in that fashion? But first, let's take care of this, the first flag here that we're talking about with the directed investigation issue. How is that language thus far? Is there anything else we want to change to that?
Chair.
Yeah.
What Board Member Owens, it sounded to me like what she was talking about is asking the council to give the DPA authority to file the complaint.
Right.
What we had previously been talking about, I thought, and what this definition now says, is that the DPA would bring back to us the recommendation that the board file a complaint. So those are sort of two different processes.
Yeah, that's right. So I would suggest going with this now and putting a flag to this flag, noting what Board Member Owens is suggesting. And she has suggested that at the end of all this, go back to City Council with that kind of wish list of different things to kind of fine tune the regulations a bit further, if I was understanding her correctly.
Okay, let me just add that it seems to me that this process, as we have it here in number 14, might be more straightforward than having the director himself or herself file the complaint, since in the interim regulations, we do allow for the board to file complaints under certain circumstances, like when there's a death or when somebody's incapacitated. I forget what else it says, but the board can file complaints already in the interim regs.
That's right. Would it be appropriate?
Maybe we shouldn't include this upon the director's recommendation if we have that authority independent of a recommendation.
Well, the reason for adding it is that, as Lieutenant Montgomery said, it would seem that it allows the board to be separated from the decision to file a complaint.
Right. No, I get that. I'm just saying, you just mentioned that in the interim regs, the board has authority to file a complaint under certain circumstances. And I'm just wondering if then this language is limiting, or if in those circumstances, we'd also need the director's recommendation. I just want to be consistent about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it does sound consistent to me as it's specific to this issue, which would allow for that type of flexibility in that particular instance with a potential directed investigation under a formal complaint.
Don't want it to be limiting. If it's, I don't have that in front of me. I'm not sure what other section you're referencing, Board Member Calavita. But I don't want it to be inconsistent, so we could say initiated by the board pursuant to section X or upon the director's recommendation.
Okay.
So we could add in pursuant to section, whatever section it is, upon the director. So another kind of phrase there.
Yeah. Or upon.
Does anyone happen to have that, which section that's in?
It's under who may file.
I'm looking at that right now too. I was reaching for my regs.
And what we could do then is have a motion on this. And then what Board Member Owens raised, that's something that can either be flagged for once we have all the various issues bundled together to request the city council and do a motion at that time, or go through the various requests that might change, like, for example, item 14. That might be one way to do so. So just kind of put this on the tracks for now, but then later on possibly revise it depending on.
So in the interim regulations, it's section 2A2.
2A2.
Roman numeral 2A2, who may file. It says complaints may also be initiated by the board upon a vote of 5 board members to authorize an investigation. So the way it's written is very strange, because it says complaints can be initiated by the board, by the board upon a vote of 5 board members to authorize an investigation. So it kind of mixes up complaints in the authorization of an investigation. So I honestly don't know what this sentence is saying.
Well, that's because in staff's mind, they were sort of one and the same. And now the board seems to want to make a distinction between a fact-finding investigation that's not instigated by a complaint. So that's why it's worded that way.
So are you saying that what this was really referring to was the board initiating a fact-finding investigation?
No, it was referring to the board filing, basically the board is filing the complaint or initiating the complaint.
I remember, because from the staff's perspective, when we asked for a fact-finding investigation, you guys approached it as if it was a complaint. But we as a board said, no, we're asking for fact-finding.
Right.
So this is kind of mixing up the two. So
right. I would view it as you're separating the two when staff's view was they were one and the same, but it's two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
What would be the best language given the context we just established here? That's a helpful reminder. What would be good language to put in here?
In this who may file section?
Yeah, under 14. there anything that we would,
Definitions.
No, that,
No, 14, I think, is good the way it is.
okay, without that naming of that section?
Yeah. Later, when we get to this section on who may file, I think we need to correct that. Like Board Member Owens pointed out, there's a little confusion under that section, so we'll have to do that.
Okay, so remember that context I just raised here about the distinction between staff versus board members' understanding of that, the terminology. So do we need to do a motion here then?
Chair, I was a little confused. You want to do a motion on this, but not on the other, so
Okay,
on Board Member Owens' suggestion, so I
yeah,
was confused. What is the distinction you're making there?
so board
We need
member,
to decide our process. I think we haven't really decided what our process is going to be.
yeah, that's true. That's a process issue. Board member Owens could, of course, raise a motion. However, it sounded like she felt it was more efficient towards the end to have bundled together various requests to go to the city with. And it could be that at that time, maybe I'm assuming there's not going to be a whole bunch of them, but there'll be more than one, that perhaps those could be either raised at a motion at that time or just considered at that time for possible motion. Board Member Owens, is that what are your thoughts on that?
I think I'm confused again. So what I was saying is we as a board are gonna go, full board, are gonna go through these regulations. And really we're looking for the other board members to kind of pipe in because we as a subcommittee have. And then, just like we did when we were going through the regulations, we agree or whatever with, okay, yes, we all are comfortable with that. And then when we're done, we package it up and send it forward to council. But when we send it forward to council, if we are asking that the director has additional duties, that also has to be part of that package of what we send forward, if that's what we decide to do when we modify these regulations. So I personally don't see us making motions every time we agree to something. I think we just agree to it or we work it out till we do agree with it. That's just my feeling.
Okay, so on the language here, because there's a little bit of discrepancy between what Board Member Calavita is proposing here under 14 and what it sounded like you're proposing in some of the potential language to go back to City Council. That was the only reason I was trying to think through a process here. Are we all okay with this then?
I would just add that I think that we should try to agree amongst ourselves as much as possible.
Yeah.
In avoidance of going back to the council, because the way I read the charter, which is in front of me now, it requires an ordinance to give additional.
That's what I was thinking. I didn't think council had authority to make changes like that.
Well, it says here to any other powers and duties regarding the board. Can take any other powers or duties as the city council may assign it by ordinance. So I think we should try to avoid that.
That's right. Director Lee did raise that previously. So Board Member Owens, that certainly doesn't take away from what you're suggesting about towards the end, like wrapping everything up and potentially making some requests. But an ordinance, I would imagine, I don't know exactly, but it sounds like somewhat of a lengthy process. Director Lee, is that something that would take some time, I imagine?
An ordinance?
Yeah.
One of this size would not take that much time. Somebody has to write it. The city attorney would review it, and then it has to go to 2 council meetings, I think. First reading and second reading.
Okay.
And then usually 30 days to go into effect, I believe.
Okay, so some levels of review with city attorneys as well, and 2 potential readings and drafting. Who would be drafting that language?
Well, I think we would do it in the first instance, and then the city attorney would vet it.
Okay, that makes sense. As a recommendation, then they would vet it for legality, for statutory construction. Okay. Well, my
Board Member Ramsey has his hand raised.
Oh yeah, sorry, Board Member Ramsey.
Has the city attorney's office given us an interpretation of the language in the charter and what it allows us to do
As to what?
as to initiating a complaint?
No.
We've not asked specifically. The deputy city attorney is a panelist, and you know, not
You may
having-
have, Board Member Ramsey, you missed this discussion from the prior meeting, which was there are a bunch of issues that were raised that we know we needed legal advice about. And I had told the board at the last meeting, I was waiting until you were done with this process, because if you didn't agree on some change, then the question might become moot.
Yeah.
It was then also pointed out that there are some questions we know we would need answered regardless of how we came out on things. So I agreed to put those before the board, city attorney, but I haven't gotten to that yet. So, so that's my plan. But I will do that.
I raised this issue with Deputy City Attorney Sam Harvey before. He sort of gave initial thoughts on it, but he never gave, an opinion. It does seem like we should be trying to act within what we think is the authority of the charter.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it would be useful to that. If we don't need to do an ordinance or request the city attorney for an ordinance, to request the city council for an ordinance, I can't see why we would. So it would be good to know from the city attorney ahead of time whether they think the current language in the charter for us to do what we're talking about would require an ordinance or not.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Deputy City Attorney Mattis, is that something you want to, I know you may not want to be ready to make a pronouncement on it, but is that something you could provide some light on the process?
Yes, we are. We are happy to look into this issue. I defer to the board and the director as to whether you would like us to look into this issue now, or it sounds like there are a number of issues that the board or the director may have. So I defer to you all whether this discrete issue comes before some of the other potential questions.
Can I just say, given how inartfully written that relevant language in the charter is, I think it, for myself at least, it would be useful to know the legal interpretation of the language before deciding the language of the charter, before deciding what the appropriate language is for the regulation that implements that section of the charter.
Plus, I think there's some advantage to going ahead and asking the city attorney rather than waiting to the end if we have several, just because, we're under kind of a time crunch. This is taking us all so long.
Yes, and I did commit to asking some questions ahead of time, like one on subpoenas was one that I had called out. And board initiated investigations is on, well, it's not on, never mind. I have a separate list of city attorney questions. It's not the May 20th memo.
So including the subpoena, which is also a big issue, but this one is the directed investigation.
Right.
Seems to be coming up a lot in the regulations subcommittee, and also those two would certainly be big ones.
Yeah, actually, sorry, this is also on the questions for the city attorney's office.
Okay. So do we want to, the city attorney, the deputy city attorney is here and has heard from us that that's something that's coming. Do we want to ask of her to start in time to start looking at this both the subpoena issue and also the directed investigation, which sounds to me like somewhat meaty? Or I kind of think best to proceed.
In my personal opinion, I think those are probably the two meatiest ones. So
yeah. So to proceed with those
I'll
two.
go ahead and I'll do that.
Okay.
Chair and Director Lee, I assume our interim regs pass muster with the city attorney, and those interim regs include the board initiating complaints upon a vote of 5 board members. Now, the city attorney went through our interim regs with a fine tooth comb and told us the things that would require additional, what do you call it? My mind's
Meet and
not.
confer, meet and confer.
Meet and confer, right. So our interim regs went through the city attorney's office, and we already had this authority for the board to initiate complaints in those interim regs.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm starting from that basis of specific language there, providing the authority for directed investigations. What would be the question then, Board Member Calavita, do you think we would be asking here of the deputy city attorney specific to the directed investigation?
I think she's saying we don't need to ask it because it's been implied, at least implicitly approved.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, we can include, if we're going to ask other questions, for example, the subpoena one, I think we can include this, but just
note that it's been.
We want to confirm that this is a possibility since it is in our interim regs, and we, yeah.
Okay, it's already in the interim regs. It was already reviewed and determined to be above board. Board Member Ramsey, is there any specific language you would ask in terms of how we would frame our question to Deputy City Attorney Mattis?
Yeah, I would ask them whether our proposed language here in 14 and then the other language in initiating the complaint comports with that relevant sentence in the charter. I mean, I understand that the interim regs were reviewed. I'm not sure whether this was disputed at the time or not, or if it was, it doesn't seem to me any harm to ask them to look at it specifically, but does this language comport with the language in the charter? I just don't have it up in front of me that, you know, says that the board can initiate a complaint. I know it's the confusing sentence that talks about complaints and investigations is the same thing, or uses the terms almost synonymously. But I'd ask whether these two sections of our permit regs comport with this. And if not, then the second question I would have is, you know, is this something that the power believe that they could be implemented with an ordinance passed pursuant to the section of the charter that gives the council the power to pass ordinances that, you know, increase powers through ordinance. And I just don't have the exact section in front of me, but I think you know the two that I'm talking about. There's only two relevant sentences in the charter. So one is the one that uses both terms, and the other one is the power to pass an ordinance. So.
Okay, I think the ordinance issue is important. So I have Board Member Owens and then Deputy City Attorney Mattis.
Oh, I want to point out that yes, the interim regulations were passed, but the Police Association filed a grievance about those interim regulations. So first off, I don't know what's the status of that grievance, but we had Lieutenant Montgomery here. It might have been our last meeting where he said that one of the challenges and one of the things that is causing angst is the fact that the board would initiate a complaint and then also do a hearing on that complaint. And this is, I mean, if we're trying to put together some regulations that hopefully we don't run into major roadblocks, it sounds like we're setting ourselves up to run into a major roadblock again by saying that the board would initiate the complaint versus taking the tact of giving the director the authority to initiate the complaint. If the PD and hopefully the association is comfortable with the director making the complaint, initiating that complaint versus the board, why wouldn't we go that route to get this thing done without another complaint on what we propose for our final regulations?
I'd say that you never know whether they're going to be good with it truly until you've actually implemented it and someone gets disciplined under it, and then whether they object in an appeal to the perp. So like I even if Lieutenant Montgomery and the chief and everyone said, and even if the BPA, sort of informally said, hey, this sounds good to us, the first police officer who gets disciplined under the procedure is going to come back and object and say that there wasn't proper meet and confer, that this violated the charter, all sorts of stuff. So, we're never going to be able to get to a point right now where it's 100%. It seems.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
I can now. We lose to you guys. I'm not sure who was lost before. I got lost temporarily.
I got lost too.
Yeah, I dropped off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see who's back on. We got Board Member Calavita, Ramsey is back, and Levine, Owens, Moore. Leftwich is connecting the audio. Deputy City Attorney Mattis here, Calavita, Lieutenant Turner, and Mizell. Are we missing anybody? Our participants are back on. So it looked like just like a temporary drop. So we had Board Member Ramsey made a good point that you don't want to prematurely prescribe your authority or purview if it's already there, because it will be challenged regardless of how we perceive. Clearly, we've laid it out. It could be challenged. But I also want to, if I'm interpreting it correctly.
Yeah. So the last statement I was made when I got cut off, I was saying they can tell us whether they feel like the sentence that utilizes initiation of an investigation and complaint synonymously is enough authority to do what Board Member Owens is talking about, or whether they feel that we would have to work underneath, I'll call it the catch-all clause that allows the city council to pass an ordinance that could grant the authority for the director to make a recommendation of a complaint. So I just think it would be good to have that guidance up front. I don't think, I don't think Board Member Owens and I are really disagreeing. I'm trying to figure out whether we move forward in path A or path B. And for me, that's going to be guided by what the city attorney, how it interprets this inartfully worded sentence in the city charter, which is ultimately what's going to have to be decided when a police officer gets disciplined under it and complains.
That's right.
I assume they're either going to say that doesn't authorize it, or they're going to say even if an ordinance is passed, that ordinance caused a change in workplace environment that required a meet and confer. So I just think we should get some advice about which path is best to go under.
Okay, I think that's right. And Deputy City Attorney Mattis has had her hand raised for some time.
Thank you. I just I wanted to request that any questions directed to our office, if we could receive them in written form, either they're from the director or from the board, that would be helpful. And I just want to note put that depending on the scope of the question related to the board's authority to initiate the complaint may be different under the charter, is potentially a different question than whether the interim regs required meet and confer. So depending on the question, the scope of the question, the answer may be different, the analysis may be different. So we'd appreciate the opportunity to review that question.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Lee and myself and the other board members will put together those questions as she's been planning to do so. We know now that we have like a priority of these two big questions. Board Member Calavita.
I just wanted to say that I think it's pretty clear that the charter does not explicitly say the board may initiate complaints or the director may initiate complaints. It doesn't say that. But I think we need to, I mean, maybe when we direct this to the city attorney's office, you know, there's a difference between enumerated powers and implied powers. And it seems to me that if you read the purpose of the charter, the very first sentence is that the purpose is to promote public trust through independent, objective civilian oversight of the Berkeley Police Department. And it seems to me that implied throughout this charter, not enumerated specifically, but implied, gives the power of oversight, broadly defined. And I think it would be a real shame if we had to be such strict constructionists or something, that there has to be that exact word in the charter for it to be legitimate. I'm hoping that the city attorney will recognize that.
No, I would just say, look, I think many of us agree with you, but we just need a legal interpretation. I'm not saying for them to do a textual analysis or look for something that's interstitial. I'm just asking for them to do a legal analysis, however they lay out on it and come back.
And I agree. I'm just hoping that this is that the purpose is read broadly. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So that goes back to that scoping issue that the deputy city.
Perhaps there could be some language in whatever memo goes to the city attorney that the subcommittee, you know, found that the terms of the charter amendment were quite ambiguous in places, contradictory and ambiguous. You know, that there was discussion about the scope of our powers, and that many of us believe that even if something is not explicitly authorized, that if you look at the broad intent, that it should be permissible. So some kind of language like that, just not.
I know a lot of us are lawyers, but let's let the lawyers do the lawyering. I mean, we're commissioners. Like, let's let
I would just like to give them some
attorneys do their job and get an independent piece of advice. I understand we're all lawyers and we all have our own interpretation, but let's let the city attorney write a memo and give it to us.
I was just suggesting we give the city attorney's office some context to describe what happened, because we've all struggled with this, and just to let them know that we found the language to be ambiguous.
Okay, those are all good recommendations, and you know the city attorney, deputy city attorney, is meeting with us, and we're very pleased that she is meeting with us on a routine basis, and that's why it's important to have her present on these conversations. You can understand that context there. So we will be working on that letter. You know, Director Lee has already started to draft a list of priorities, and this is one of them. Board Member Calavita, do you still have your hand up, or?
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Okay, so great. So Board Member Owens has her hand up.
So can we go back to the letter from May the 20th? And for me, I think it would be helpful to just go through really quick the things that were outlined in it, because some of those things we have already kind of agreed to do some of those things. And I'll throw an example out there, like number 2, deciding when a hearing is needed. One of the things that came up was if the director recommended a sustained finding and the board agreed, we didn't have to have a hearing. But what we heard back was that the association felt like they wanted to have the opportunity, or the department said, because the association hasn't been participating, but the department said that the officers would feel very strongly about having, if a decision is sustained, having the opportunity to present their side of the story. And we as a subcommittee said we were okay with that. If it's sustained, we would have a hearing. If the director recommended sustained and the board agreed with it, we would be okay with the officers having a hearing. So I kind of want to throw that out to the full board, because if we all agree with that, we can strike that off of that memo and then move on to the next thing that we agreed to, which was not showing the body worn camera video prior to the hearing. So I just kind of, if we can just go through that memo and strike out the things that we as a full board agree with, and then that honestly leaves the majority of things that we need a city attorney's decision on, because those things we don't. Those things that we can just make a decision as a board. So
Right.
I think if we can go through just that memo and knock out those things with the full board, that we can, and then that should flush out all the things that need to go to the city attorney.
Okay, good reminder. That's what we had agreed to do. So let's go back. When the system crashed, we had the draft in front of us. I think 14, it seemed like people were good to go with that, right?
No,
And then,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the memo on May 20th.
yeah. No, I understand. So if I just to loop back our thread to what was there when the system crashed, I think item 14 was okay from what I understand. If anyone has any objection, let me know. But we want to jump right to the May 20th memo and start, it's 9:17. We have about, another like 30 minutes and just pop through those items that are listed. And Board Member Owens had given a good example of the hearing issue that I think probably most folks would agree that that's fine. But let's have a engaged conversation on that. So number one, should we go by order then?
Yes. So that's number one, city attorney question, I think,
Right.
unless we want to take each one of those.
Number one, we ready to discuss, and we're going to forward that to the city attorney. Number two, deciding when a hearing is needed. When FNR findings and recommendations are brought to the board.
That's the example that I just gave where
Okay.
Right.
the director brings forth a sustained finding. We agree as a board, it should be sustained. The feedback that we got was the officers would like to have a hearing,
Yep.
even if the finding is sustained by both entities, because they would like to present their case. We as a subcommittee agreed that we were okay with, if it's sustained, that we would have a hearing. So I just want to throw it out to the full board as to whether they agree with that.
Okay, good. Let's go with that process. What do folks think? The subcommittee felt that that's fine. You want a full hearing when there's a sustaining.
It's on page 23 of the packet if you want to see what the subcommittee did. Kathy?
Yes. Well, I'm not in the packet. I'm not in that packet.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
is E5
And
of Roman numeral 2, E5.
2E5, okay.
and Board Member Levine has her hand raised on this.
Page 9 of the.
I was just reading what the subcommittee has here, but what I was going to suggest is if the subject officer elects, he or she may have a full hearing. I mean, to require it if the officer doesn't want it, or
Sure. How about that then? Modify language.
Good point. I like that.
Board Member Calvita and others and Owens who are on the subcommittee. I think that makes sense. You could make it a opt-in. Is that the term? Yeah, opt-in.
Yeah, I think it's fine. So where's the language?
It would be somewhere in here. Do we want to say unless the subject
So how about a
waive-
confidential complaint hearing may be convened upon the request or something like that?
Instead of shall, maybe convene.
Yeah,
Allegation.
at the election of the subject officer.
yeah.
Yeah, at the election of subject officer. I like that. So maybe convene on all allegations. Maybe, and should it be all allegations then? I think that makes sense. It wouldn't be just, if they opted in, they wouldn't just like,
Or you could
We had this conversation at the subcommittee level, which was, is it practical to try to split up, to try to have
Right.
hearing on some allegations and none? And
It's not really right.
it came
So-
down on, no, it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Good. Thanks for reminding me. So let's leave that in there for now. There's some practicality reasons for, the
Then
totality.
how about just add to the end upon the request
To be convened,
of the subject officer?
or if elected by the subject officer
Yeah.
on the request.
Sure.
What did you, wait? what
Upon
did
the
you-
election of the subject officer.
Okay. Any questions about that? Sorry, that looks good. Any further conversation on this one?
We go, I'm gonna go back to May 20th.
I mean, are you going to pull up a new document?
Yeah, the May 20th memo.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. You're flipping back and forth. Thank you.
So are we on the next number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 3. Is it tiny on your screen or just my screen? Let's see.
Pretty small.
Is that better?
Yes,
Okay.
but I have my own paper here anyway.
Okay, good. All right. So number 3, evidence presented at F&R stage.
So I'm gonna just jump in. Basically, what this was about was whether or not we, as a full board, when the director presents their finding and recommendation, whether or not the director would show us the body camera video at that point. And one of the feedback that we got from Lieutenant Montgomery was they felt that by showing us the body worn camera video at that point, they potentially could shape our view prior to the hearing. So he thought that it might be better if we didn't see the body worn camera at the F&R stage and, not see it until we actually had a hearing. And we on the subcommittee said we were comfortable with that. So this is another one of those things where we wanted to, although we were comfortable at the subcommittee level, we wanted to get feedback from the full board as to when we would see that body worn camera video.
Good overview. Any questions about that? About the subcommittee's recommendation here?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes. Remember Ramsey?
I'm not sure I'm really understanding and think that it makes sense. I mean, I think, if we get to the, findings and recommendation stage and it comes to us from the director and we're sitting there saying, I would really like to see the body worn camera information so I can make a decision about whether this needs to be modified or not. We're going to end up seeing the body worn camera footage before hearing. So I'm just, and I also don't see us as being, like prejudiced or, some, in that our, prejudice will be, or that the probative value of the body worn camera will be greatly outweighed by undue prejudice or something caused by seeing it. I just don't see that. And so not in this particular situation. If there's any prejudice that will occur from watching the body worn camera, it won't be undue prejudice. It'll be like we viewed evidence and we saw it and had a reaction to it. That's not undue prejudice. So, those two things to me seem like it doesn't make sense. Like if we need to see the body worn camera footage of the findings and recommendations, we should. Otherwise, we're just going to ask for it. And I don't see the threat of any undue prejudice occurring here. It just means there's going to be probative value, and we'll all look at it in the context of the full hearing or the other evidence that's that's discovered during the investigation period, and we'll weigh the body worn camera like we will all other evidence, including the officer's, statements to the investigator.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful point here to kind of consider. Is there really undue evidence here when we're reviewing evidence for probative evidence for purposes of
Undue prejudice.
Undue prejudice when reviewing body worn camera for purposes of determining whether something is probative.
I think Board Member Mizell has his hand raised.
Oh, thank you. Yes, he does. Sorry, missing that. Board Member Mizell and then Board Member Levine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I agree with pretty much everything Board Member Ramsey said. I feel like in my experience in investigations, usually I've been handed, I know this new board process, I should be clear, we have the findings, which is evidence, or at least it's a summation of evidence already in front of us. I can't imagine that the video, which is also evidence, shouldn't be shown potentially at the same time. I agree. I don't see the undue prejudice argument. And I would argue that it is potentially more of a disservice to a officer subject to investigation when we've had the process where, we all see the body worn camera at the actual hearing one time before maybe. And then there tends to be issues with the body worn camera video, which is, again, not non-staff, clearly a problem with the city's programming or something. And now we've only had one opportunity to see a video at the hearing rapidly and have to then make a decision, which to me is a worse process than us seeing the video earlier, being able to review it, and then having either the subject officer or their representatives respond, point out things in the video. I'd love to see that in those hearings. And I think that is probably more fair than, forbidding us from watching the video until a hearing is had. So that's all. Okay,
thank you. That's helpful. Concerns around like access to evidence for the kind of quasi trial of fact. Board Member Levine, please.
Yeah, I completely agree with Board Member Ramsey, and I'm always looking for more evidence. And frankly, from what we've seen so far, the video, the body worn camera, I haven't reacted viscerally. We haven't seen anything that's so extreme. I think the opposite could be argued, that it's in the officer's interest to show it. I'm more weary of making a decision with less evidence than with full exposure. So I really don't think we should agree to, it becomes more of a rubber stamp. It's just, I want to know what I'm making a decision based on.
Okay, thank you again. Back to the probative evidence aspect and having full access. Board Member, I'm sorry, is Director Lee, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think there are two people ahead of me, at least on my screen.
Oh, yeah, somehow you jumped up because you're the host, I think. Board Member Leftwich and Board Member Calavita were there first, and then I think you're next.
I was just going to say that I kind of had the minority view on the subcommittee on this, and I had pointed out to Lieutenant Montgomery that in my experience, actually, the body-worn camera footage can be quite exculpatory for the officer. So I do think it is often in their best interest for us to see it, because it's one thing to see something on paper and some statement, and it's quite different to see the footage. So
I think that makes sense. What I'm hearing is that, if we are functioning as, again, I'm using a term quasi trial of fact, and we're expected to review the evidence, there should be a certain degree of trust that we're weighing the evidence for its relevancy and its probativeness in a totality of circumstances context. Board Member Calavita?
Yes, I basically agree with everything that's been said, but I just wanted to, I think what the subcommittee did here was that we were working in a very collaborative way with Lieutenant Montgomery. And I think that it seemed to some of us that this was not, if the officers felt so strongly about this, that it wouldn't be that big a deal for us to not see it. It's not that we would only see it at the hearing. We go and see it, before the hearing at our leisure and can watch it for as long as we want. So it's not, but that said, I do agree with everything that's been said. So it's just a matter of, I think the subcommittee pretty much on this was attempting to be collaborative on an issue that didn't seem like that huge a deal.
Yeah, that's a good point, Board Member Calavita. We're hearing now that it might be a bigger deal than we should have thought. And so Board Member Owens, did you have your hand raised before?
No, I'm next.
Oh, wait, that's right. Okay, Director Lee.
I was going to say what Board Member Calavita just said, which is to remind people that they do have the opportunity, once a hearing is set, to view the body-worn camera footage at their leisure. The other thing I wanted to mention is that for really involved cases, that would mean that to see enough footage could turn the FNR presentation into a fairly lengthy one. You may recall the case where we tried to do the multi-view, and our investigator Norris and my thinking behind that was, we had three cameras at a certain point going on at the same time, and we thought that would save time, but it was more confusing to you who had not seen this video over and over again like we had. So that is something that I felt, this is really an aside from balancing the probative value of the evidence versus any prejudicial effect, is that administratively it's a little bit easier for staff, but that's just something, another factor that to staff is important. Thank you.
Those are all important factors to have raised from the subcommittee conversation. We're hearing pretty strongly, however, that in the direction of the probative value that they disagreement with this recommendation. So I think Board Member Ramsey and then Board Member Owens.
All I was going to say is real quickly, sometimes the FNR stage is the only time we hear evidence. Because
I'm sorry.
The FNR stage is the only time we hear evidence. If we agree with the director's recommendation, then we don't even get to have a hearing. So I just can't see not, having a situation where we're building into the process to not see what often is considered to be the most probative evidence.
Right.
That seems like that would potentially lead us to making flawed decisions personally.
Yeah.
I think that's a strong point. The whole value behind body-worn cameras is exactly what you're stating, that sometimes it can be the piece of evidence that's quite critical one way or the other, exculpatory or otherwise. Board Member Owens?
Oh, I was gonna say the same thing that Board Member Calavita said, as well as Director Lee, related to, we were trying to work with the lieutenant on something we thought was kind of low-hanging fruit. I will also say that related to that one particular case where the Director Lee brought up, where we had multiple cameras from multiple views during the FNR process, and quite honestly for me, the body-worn camera was almost useless because I was so confused by what was going on. And to see all of those cameras separately would have taken quite a long time. And we did end up doing a hearing and, being able to view all of those cameras independently was kind of nice. So, but I do understand what everybody else is saying. I do understand where everybody else is coming from on this point, but that's all.
Thank you. So, what I'm hearing here is on the substantive side, there's clearly strong opinion that outweighs it kind of more, we thought it was kind of pragmatic, move it forward type of thing, and get collaboration on what we thought was low hanging fruit. So it sounds like we kind of misinterpreted this. So on this issue, do we need to have a motion to Director Lee, what's the proper process?
I would just ask if there are any board members opposed to not adopting this recommendation from the subcommittee.
Okay, good question. Are there any board members who are opposed to not adopting this recommendation from the Regulations Subcommittee?
Sorry, opposed to not adopting?
Yeah, sorry. Basically, it sounds like the consensus is.
This is the recommendation from the subcommittee.
That's right. And then number 3, and then it sounds like most people are like, that doesn't sound right to a subcommittee. You kind of
right.
So, does anyone disagree with the idea that we messed it up?
No, I agree with that. I actually agree. And I think that you all make a really good point, especially the point about it could be in many cases that there is no hearing. And therefore, this would be the only evidence the only body worn camera footage that people see. Yeah. So I'm in favor now of rejecting this.
Yeah, so am I.
But I'd like to figure out how to fix it word-wise.
Okay. So the subcommittee members themselves, and I'm hearing this from Board Member Owens as well, like I have a feeling that we should probably, given what we heard, and we're in agreement with it, that we're going to pull that recommendation. But is there any language we need to change on it, or just entirely pull it?
Yes, there's language to be changed.
So let's bring it back here.
Language in the regs, you mean?
Yeah, here we are.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to delete this, right?
Could you refer to the section? Oh,
yes. I'm in.
Okay, so
I was looking at my own page. I'll look at this.
Sure. For members of the public, let's do a reference to it. And I'm having a problem because it's tiny on my screen. It might be my fault. Board decision upon reviewing, that's number 5.
We're in section
page 20. It's page 23 of the May 25th packet, if that helps.
And page 9 of the regs.
9 of 22 at the bottom, or page 23.
Right. Thank you. Section 2E.
Okay, 2E.
2E something. 2E4. 5. Sorry. 5. Yeah. So here, this gray, we would cut that.
Yeah.
And then we would put this back in.
Yep.
Right, which I think was the language I had inserted initially.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So I think that's it.
So can we take a quick look at that? Upon reviewing, is that right? Upon reviewing the investigative evidence and the director's findings and recommendations, and viewing any relevant body worn footage, hang on a second, my screen is shifting off. Camera footage, the board shall proceed as follows. If the board affirms or proposes a sustained finding or recommendation of disciplinary any allegation, or decides that further fact finding is warranted.
Do we want to get into this now, or are we going to stick to the, I mean, we can, but I wasn't sure we were going to.
So we have to stick to the time frame. I think we want to make sure that we don't exceed our time too much. It's 9:40 already. So, and that's right at about the hour. What do folks, let's try to finish this as best we can here on this section though.
Okay, I thought we were sticking to the issues on that memo.
Oh, right.
I agree. Let's stick with the memo, because the memo.
Right, let's stick to the memo.
Flush out what needs to go to legal.
Yeah, thank you. There's no other language on that section with regard to the memo that we flagged. So let's take a quick look at the next item on the memo. And I think we should, though, look towards wrapping this up now.
Oh, actually, we are on that section.
Sorry?
We were in that section now. If we're looking at number 4.
Yeah, number 4.
Okay,
He's in
really
the same section.
So let's take a look at this quickly and decide whether or not we want to proceed for a bit longer, but I think we should start to wrap up. Relaying findings to the chief. A last relatively minor issue, okay, could be minor, in draft regs section 2E5, subsection B and C, concerns wording about setting the findings. A subcommittee member is arguing for, quote, the board shall send its findings, unquote, to the chief. While the director agrees that the findings, quote unquote, belong to the board, the act of sending them is performed by the director or ODPA staff. Is that something you want to address now? Is that a relatively minor issue?
I mean, that was my proposal again, because even if staff physically sends the email, my recollection was that the charter amendment says that the board shall send its findings. So I just thought it was more accurate to say the board, even if technically, or I don't, you know, maybe the chair also, but it did say the board, so.
Is there any comment on this?
I think if that's what the charter says, that's the way we should phrase it.
Right. So why don't we try to drop that in there, and then that'll be the last item for today.
Where does it say it in the charter?
Yeah, I don't know where that is. I'm looking for it.
Board Member Levine, do you remember where that is?
No, I was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Board Member Leftwich.
Yeah.
Your hand happened to be up, and I was looking at your.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm kind of losing it at this point, and I don't see it's in the comment, but can we come back to this?
Yes.
Because I know I didn't pull it out of thin air. And the
Okay.
discussion was, well, technically, if the director's sending the email, but anyway,
All right, so
I'm getting a little foggy.
that's fine. Yeah, I think it's getting late. We next time around we can pull in that, but we'll go back to that. We'll flag it and try to find if it's in the language, in fact, in the charter amendment. But also, can we go back really quickly to the memo and see how many, just get an overview globally of how many flags we had there again? Just so we have a strategy for when we meet for the special meeting.
You mean the May 20th letter? Memo?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Or
one.
you- For the special meeting?
Yeah, just to be prepared and have an overview. We have a total of 6. I thought there was more.
Yeah, we've gotten through, we're up to 4 and 6 is going to the city attorney, so.
So I know some folks are feeling foggy. What is the feeling number of taking a look at number 5, or should we just stop right now?
No,
Okay, no.
no.
Definitely.
Chair, I wanted to ask if we could go to one really quickly. And
You what?
I go back to 1, which is subpoenas, which in currently we don't have. So to me, and I'd be happy to hear board members' comments if they are at our next meeting on this. But to me, the biggest thing stymieing us from using our subpoena power is essentially how do we keep records confidential? And I don't know, and again, I've not been on the budget subcommittee. I know folks are probably far more aware than I am on it, but to me, all it requires is the city to provide a means for us to confidentially share records, which could be an encrypted email. It could be some other service I've not thought of that's proprietary. But because this hasn't happened, and again, I know we're going to get some of these questions answered, but this isn't specifically in this number 1. We're a year into having this board, and I still do not know how to actually subpoena something, which I think is just a vote of the 5 of us. What happens when we subpoena something? What happens if there's not a response to the subpoena under the timelines mandated in the charter? And who decides, which I assume is the city attorney, but who decides when there's a discrepancy between us and the department on what state and federal law says? Because to me, this is a very important power that we have not even attempted to use, in part because it's unclear how to use it. Some of those questions are addressed in this number 1. Some of them I think we could consider adding, and at our next meeting, I'm fine doing that. But I still think there are striking questions about the subpoena power that are unanswered and not currently in this memo, that will strongly impact whether it's means anything in this city, quite frankly. Because if it becomes an issue of we subpoena for records, we voted unanimously to get these records, The department comes back and says, well, there's this conflict in state law, so we're going to hold on to all these records. What is the timeline and process for that being decided? Because if it's, well, the city attorney will look at it and get back to you 6 months from now, well, now the subpoena is useless. If it's, well, some other party will look at it. Okay, what's the timeline? To me, those are really important questions, and the charter leaves it completely without answers. So I just wanted to preface those issues now, and really stress that it has to be on the city to provide us these basic things to actually make this process work. Because if it's, well, we don't have the ability to do it with our regular emails and our regular computers, I'm not looking for really expensive things, of course, but that's on the city, and that needs to potentially be a part of considerations in the budget. I know we're very late in the process for the upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah, those are very good questions, Vice Mayor, Vice Chair, Vice Mayor,
Vice Mayor,
maybe in the future, Vice Chair Mizell. So I think Director Lee, is that something that maybe that basically sounds like kind of a flow chart type of thing, like at different steps? What happens if this, if that? Do we want the Vice Chair to email that to us to potentially draft in here?
I was going to ask him to do that.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Mizell, those are good questions. Can you send those to us so that we can revise that, number one? And then we want to move towards adjourning, and I want to.
Board Member Levine has her hands up.
That's
and
right.
I know that she has lots of experience with subpoenas.
Yes,
No,
make sure Board Member Levine.
I can't do any more tonight. I've been diligently.
Yes, these guys have been.
I'm really, and this is important. I want to participate. I can't do any more tonight.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good reminder. Both you and Board Member Moore must be exhausted. So,
Right.
And we had intended to end this a little earlier. So it's 9:47. Let's finish this up now. I don't think there's any more. Let's remember where we're at. We're going to get some additional language from Vice Chair Mizell. And next time around, we're going to jump right back into that memo. That's a good process. Okay, any other comments or questions on that? I don't think so. Not seeing or hearing any. We should proceed to let's see here. Public comment. Let me pull up the timer thing. And share my screen. Okay. And who do we have on public comment?
Cordell Hindler.
Mr. Hindler?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So good evening, Chair Chang, board members. I am Cordell Hindler. I am a concerned resident of Richmond. Because watching this this meeting earlier, I was very surprised because I was looking at the entire agenda packet, and when I saw the adjournment time, 11 p.m., I feel that I'm not getting my voice heard, because as someone who has experienced, sitting through long meetings and I never get to have my voice heard because I feel that it's unfair. Let me provide an example. I wanted to speak on the old business item regarding the buyers group. I didn't get a chance to speak on it last time around. So that really hurts me because I'm trying to understand how how the meeting procedures go, but you also got to think about the public. They've been sitting here waiting for about 2.5 hours, and it's like, I just feel that our voice is not being heard. So I will remind the board that before you take any action, before you vote on any action, the chair and vice chair has to open up the public comment portion to hear from the community. Because I have been in similar meetings that has taken a length amount of time. So I'm also an uncle to a soon to be high schooler. I'm trying to teach him how to stand up for himself, in public settings. So I'm asking at the board to be very, very considerate to hear from the public. on any item on the agenda because people are interested in hearing about either the buyers group or vice versa. So that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Saganor?
Thank you. I understand that the structure of the meetings is that public comment really is only at the beginning and the end of the meetings. And unlike some other groups where public comment is taken on every item, the PAB and many of the commissions are set up so that public comment only happens at the beginning or the end. I again want to specifically thank you for your efforts in working on the regulations to have strong regulations that really will support the oversight functions that you really do need to have. I appreciate that the BPD is looking to have regulations that circumscribe what can be done and make things sort of more predictable and in more narrow channels. But it is really important that not knowing what kinds of issues may arise with possible police misconduct, that you be able to have, for instance, a way to respond and follow up on anonymous complaints and things of that nature. So thank you very much for doing that. And I just want to say I was very disappointed that I was not able to stop by the booth on for Juneteenth. I actually had gone out of town and got stuck out of town by unfortunately contracting a very mild case of COVID on the plane. In spite of being double masked and so forth, there was somebody sitting near us who was not masked and who was coughing the entire time, basically. So my recommendation to you is if you can all avoid flying, this is really not a good time to be on an airplane. If you must go on an airplane, for God's sake, certainly double mask and wear one of those stupid plastic face shields if necessary. But it's pretty bad out there. But thank God for being vaccinated and boosted. I was not seriously ill, but unlike the person who'd been on my flight, I did not come back again until I was clear. So thank you very much. And I hope to get some other opportunity in the future to meet some of you face to face. Thank you.
Thank you. Words of wisdom there. John Lindsay Poland.
Good evening. I know you all are tired, so I'll be brief. I just wanted to comment on something the chief said earlier, where the chief talked about AB 41, military equipment policy, and use of force. And I think this is a common conflation.
Mm-hmm.
The state law talks about use of this equipment, not use of force.
Yeah.
And I find in Director Lee's memo that was sent today, a similar kind of, I wouldn't interpret AB 41 this way because that state law is organized around types of equipment, use policies for types of equipment. And Director Lee said, some of the most relevant policies to look at are the use of force policy and the First Amendment assembly policy. Whereas I think that the policies around types of equipment, the LRAD, the rifles, and so on, are the most relevant for this particular state law. And so just wanted to note that. And again, we'll be available to, in whatever way I can be, to support y'all's work on this. And have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Do you have any other members of the public? I don't see any. Great. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Seconded? Any objections or otherwise? No objections, so moved. Thank you, everybody, and those of you who been here to do for the whole day. Thanks. Get lots of rest.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Special meeting next Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.